All right, so let's talk about the child tax credit and the advanced child tax credit dependent credits and the IRS Form W-4. So if we take a look at the W-4 form here and we scroll down, step 3 is very confusing. And it is because this is really the tax credit section, but it's being presented as this child and dependent credit section, kind of an afterthought with the other credits. But really, step 3 is for all tax credits. So if you're just looking at this, you would think that you should multiply it because that's what it says. Multiply the number of qualifying children under the age of 17 by 2,000. But I find that's a mistake. And same thing for the dependents at 500. And I'm going to show you why. So let's jump into an example of somebody that is earning $120,000 of married filing jointly. So I have my quick tax calculator here where I have it on a Google sheet, but it's $120,000. And if you subtract the standard deduction of $27,700, then you're going to get a taxable income of $92,300. If you apply this to the tax brackets, our total tax liability is $10,921. That's great. So if we set all the same stuff up in the IRS Form W-4 online estimator, we put it in as married filing jointly. I already did this so we can zip through it. I put in $120,000 income. And if we get to the very end, it's going to give us basically the same answer. It's going to say $10,927. Why is it off by $6? Because if you look at the 1040, you can see there's this presidential election campaign fund at $3 for you and your spouse. If you check that off, that's going to withhold an additional $6. That's how they get that $927 and not $921. Okay, so now that we have that set up, now we're going to go ahead and add a child to this calculation. And I'm going to go through the math so you can really understand what I'm talking about here. So if we go back up to the top and go to the tax credit section and we click on this and say we have one child that's 3 years old, this is going to drop by exactly $2,000. And there you go. It dropped from $10,927 to $8,927. So that exact amount. So let's go ahead and rewrite these up on my whiteboard here so I can explain why you don't want to necessarily put in $2,000 in there. So first, we're going to write up that we're making $120,000 just so we can see that. And our total taxes, married filing jointly, is going to be $10,927 or $921, whichever one you want to go with. $927. Now, applying the child tax credit means that we're going to subtract $2,000 from this tax liability. And that's how we get the $8,927. And that's all good and well. So what we're doing on our taxes is basically taking this number and dividing it by the amount of pay periods that we're going to have throughout the course of the year. So if we're paid monthly, then that gets divided by 12. If we're paid twice a month, it gets divided by 24 and so on. So let's just assume it's by 24. So we can take this 8,000, I'm going to do it on my calculator right here, 8,927 divided by 24, and that gives us $371.95, and then we can just round that to 372. So let's say that's 372. This is the amount that we need to withhold from each paycheck. Now, assuming that we withheld too much year to date or too little year to date, that is what the IRS Form W-4 online estimator goes to adjust. That's why when you're going through it, and I'll show you again, that's why when you're going through the IRS Form W-4 online estimator, and if I scroll up to here to the income section, this is why you're putting in your tax withholdings year to date. So enter your federal taxes paid year to date is right here, year to date. So that will adjust the W-4. And I'll show you how we can verify that. If we come here and we say, oh, how should I fill this out? We click on this link and it's going to give me the W-4. And look at that. We applied for the child tax credit. Our total tax liability is still this $8,927, but it's giving me a W-4 where I need to withhold extra withholdings at $71. Does this mean that I should leave this blank? Yes, it does, if this is your situation. Because if we come back to here and our year-to-date withholdings were different, let's say instead of $5,000 that we withheld only $1,000. So we didn't withhold as much, and we go back to the results. And again, the same thing, it's still $8,927. This isn't going to change unless we change our situation. but it's not going to change. What's going to change is the amount we need to withhold on each paycheck given how much we've already withheld year to date. So again, if we click on this W-4, it's going to be different. And look at that. It increased it to $1,071. Now let's go back yet again and say, you know what? When I looked at my pay stub, it said I withheld $8,000 year to date, and I was withholding $750 per paycheck. So if we come back to here, the results, again, this number doesn't change, but this number does. This top number and this bottom number do, because it's depending on how much we withheld year to date. I don't think we can go to zero. Can't? Yeah, we can. So we can still get no refund. So let me click on that W-4 form and click on that. Look at that. It put $8,142 in the tax credit section because it's adjusting our tax withholding. So if we do this, then at the end of the year, we're going to get to this number right here, $8,927. That means we won't get a refund, and that means we won't have to pay at the end of the year if this is our tax liability, and that's how much we've withheld. So if we withheld too much, that's how we get a refund. And if we hold too little, that's when we have to pay. So that is how it works. So it has nothing to do with applying here for the child tax credit or the dependent credit if you put it in here. So that could be vastly different. Even the same situation, you take two people earning $120,000, two different households earning $120,000 with one child. This is going to be their tax liability, but they might fill out the IRS Form W-4 completely differently, especially if they're going in and updating it. Now, if it was like January 1st and everything was exactly the same, then yes, it would make sense to put $2,000 in there. But that's in a perfect world. That's on January 1st. It only works like one time. And in almost every other instance, there's some slight variation where you need to make a change. So at the end of the day, you really should use the IRS Form W-4 online estimator. And then you can go back in as often as you want, but go back in at least like quarterly just to make sure that you're on track. And that's how you can avoid getting any tax surprises at the end of the year. And if you want to see how much you could save by putting in money into your 401k, you can run all those numbers right in that online estimator to kind of show you what your paycheck will be and kind of figure out what your tax withholdings will be. So that is how you actually adjust your IRS Form W-4. So don't pay attention to step 3. Just use the IRS Form W-4 online estimator, and it'll be so much more accurate. And you'll probably be a lot happier because you're going to get the biggest paycheck possible and not have any tax surprises at the end of the year. If you have any questions on this, let me know in the comments down below. And if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.